great to see everybody again. Today, let's look at a clip from a podcast I listened to where the guest, Tasha Eurich, talks about the process of self-awareness and how we might make some common mistakes when we try to introspect in an effort to become self-aware. Ironically, this insightful woman appeared on the Art of Manliness podcast, where she shared her thoughts about self-awareness. Let's listen.
But as it turns out, there are so many things about ourselves that are basically unknowable. This is very stressful for introspectors to say, wait a minute, if I don't ask myself the question, I can't find the answer. So I think that's a piece of it is we have to understand that a lot of our unconscious thoughts and feelings and motives are not going to be available to us.
Yeah, no argument there. It's really, really hard to know what's going on in our own minds because so much of it is hidden from our conscious awareness. I think that's why she says that self-awareness is so difficult, because sometimes that extra effort that we try to put in, we push too hard, and it leads us to come to the wrong conclusion, to go down the wrong path.
And the challenge then is if we don't know that and we ask ourselves a question, we find an answer that feels true, but maybe isn't true. Let's say I'm running a startup and I get in a blowout fight with one of my partners. And I ask myself, why did that happen? What I might decide is, maybe this person and I just don't know how to work together. But maybe the actual reason was I didn't eat breakfast that morning and my blood sugar was low and I wasn't in control of my emotions in the same way I would be otherwise. So I think that's just a good example of where, if we pounce on the first answer that feels true, sometimes it can lead us away from the truth about ourselves. That's just one example of the mistakes we can make when we're introspecting.
Yeah, so it sounds like Eurich is trying to say that we can't always explain our behavior by the first idea that comes to our head, the first explanation that sounds right. Because when you try to describe the reasons behind your behavior or your thinking patterns, you can probably come up with 8 to 10 plausible reasons for why something is the way that it is. And while all of the reasons might contribute, the different weights to assign to each of the reasons is very hard to ascertain. So we should be careful when we're introspecting not to latch on or to give too much weight to only one explanation.
Thankfully, there's a small change we can make that will make introspection actually work for us. So if I go back to the example I gave, what we found of, I get in a fight with my business partner and I ask why. Why did that happen? Why do I feel this way? Why is this other person always starting fights with me? When we looked at what do highly self-aware people do differently, we found that they almost never asked themselves why questions. So they didn't ask those questions that I just rattled off.
So that's very interesting. Oftentimes, if we want to explain our behavior to get greater insight into ourselves, it's very common to ask the question of why, but Eurich says, no, perhaps there's a better way.
They had a very small kind of change that completely altered the effectiveness of their introspection. And what we found is they tended to ask about 10 times as many what questions. So the example in this situation would be, what was going on in that conversation? Or what part of that issue do I own? Or what can I do differently in the future to prevent this? And at first, to me, the difference was really subtle. But as I started getting into it, what I discovered was essentially why questions make us more emotional. What questions keep us more level-headed?
I mentioned this in a previous video that why questions are often laced with judgment. Oftentimes, there's an underlying assumption in a why question of, I don't understand the reasons for doing this, so please explain it to me. And if you're asking that question of yourself, of course you can't always identify the exact reason why you behaved a certain way or the exact reason why something happened. There could be 8 to 10 plausible reasons, as I said before. So I really like the idea of using what questions instead when introspecting, because It really allows you to broaden and build the context around your behavior and around other people's impressions of us. And it allows us to approach the situation with a little bit less judgment and emotion, and treating self-awareness and treating introspection as more of a fact-finding mission.
Why questions tend to focus us on the problem and just kind of reliving it over and over? What questions help us be more solution focused?
Yeah, again, well said. Why only focus on the problem, especially if it's always difficult to use the exact causal chains, when you can instead focus on the facts in front of you and what you can do to change those facts in the future.
Why questions tend to trap us in the past? We get stuck in just reliving it over and over. And what questions help us move forward?
Similar idea here. We can't always know the exact reasons. We'll never have full information as to why things happen the way that they do. But what we can do is to try to collect as much personal data as possible so that we can inform and try to inform better decisions in the future, as well as develop a greater sense of context around the decisions that we make today.
And so the tool that I teach all around the world is called What, Not Why. And it's been transformational, I think, for so many people, myself included, that if we just make that small change, a lot of amazing things can happen.
Well, I couldn't say that better myself. I hope that you found this interesting or thought-provoking, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Until then, cheers!